Morning. Well, here we are again. It's been a while since I've been here. Been busy doing other things, so now I've got a 2.5 day window to try and get all the last jobs finished, so that I can then start prepping the boat for paint, which means basically sanding. So what's still left to do? Well, it's basically the fittings for various sailing hardware. So these are the two blocks that I glued up last time. So these need sanding down. I need to take the black tape off the back, round the edges, get them all cleaned up, drill the holes in, get these clam cleats screwed in place, make sure the holes are a good size, then take these off again. And when that's all done, these can then be glued onto the centreboard case, one either side, ready for screwing the clam cleats on. So those need all, that's mostly sanding there. Also, the block that I epoxied in place last time, where the main sheet block will be attached, that needs sanding down, and also I'm going to sand around it, and I'm going to reinforce that with 2 strips of fiberglass. So it's just to give it as much grip on the bottom of the boat as possible. I don't want to have to drill through from underneath, and the last thing I want is for the main sheet to pull it out. So it really does need to be solidly glassed in place. The rudder, the bottom of the rudder hasn't been glassed because of the curve. It was difficult to get glass onto that, so it's been epoxied but not glass. So I'm going to sand that down and try and put a piece around the circumference of the leading edge of the rudder. What else? Because tomorrow I'm going to epoxy the centreboard and the rudder stock and tiller. I need to build a little support of some kind which I can screw to these benches, and that will hold the rudder stock in place so that I can just get 3D access to it and just paint it all over 3 coats. So that shouldn't take too long. I've already got a design in mind for that. So there we go. Let's see how far I can get. Okay, so here's one of the pads that I've just finished rounding off and sanding down. I've drilled the holes and I've actually put the screws in to attach the 2 clam cleats for that side, ready to go onto the centreboard case. Now the screws do protrude a tiny bit, probably about 2mm, which is fine because they're not going to go through the centreboard case, but they will go into it. So this means that there will be a tiny little bit of wood once the screws are screwed in that will not be protected by epoxy. Even though all of this will be epoxied, once I put the screws in it will go into bare wood, and there will then be a way for water potentially to get from the screw down there and into the bare wood. So how am I going to do that? I don't yet know. Quick solution would be to put these onto the centreboard, sand the area where they're going to go, move the clam cleats and put the screws through so I can see where the screw holes should be, and then make a tiny 2mm depth hole for each of the 4 screws, and then when I glue this on, that glue will go into those holes, and so when then I can put the screws through, they will go into epoxy rather than into wood. So that's probably the best bet. I don't know. I'll come up with a solution and let you know. So that's one pad done, ready to go, and with its little problem. Now I'm going to do the other one. Okay, so it's 5 o'clock. That's pretty much the end of the day. Been working since about 10. So started a bit earlier than usual. So I'm kind of finishing a little bit earlier as well. Feeling pretty tired. So I got all the sanding done this morning and had some lunch, and then this afternoon I've done all the epoxy work. So first off, I've got the these are the pads for the halyard and reefing cleats. So those blocks that will be at the base of the mast, the cleats will be here so that I can cleat those off. So there's one either side. So those have been sanded and glued in place. I did drill out a little bit of a indentation so that the screw head, or the very tip of the screw as it goes through, will go into that indentation, and that indentation will be full of epoxy because it'll fill up while I'm gluing these together. So I smeared glue into the hole, into that indentation, and when I clamp that on, the pressure will squeeze the glue into that indentation even further, and so that should be fine. I've also glassed in the block here, which is going to be the block for a wooden block, which is going to take the main sheet block. So that'll get, there's 2 screws that screws that in there, and then that'll run to the back because that's integral with the toe strap. And the toe strap, I've got 4 holes there which I'll fill in tomorrow, which will then on the next day be drilled, and I can attach the 2 little cleats where the back of the toe strap gets tied off. This I really wanted to get glued in and glassed in strongly because there might be a lot of pressure on that. You know, if the boom goes out, it's going to be pulling with a lot of force against that. So that's been glued in, it's been filleted, and it's got 2 layers of fiberglass on top. So hopefully that'll be pretty strong. And also finally, I put some glass on the bottom of the rudder. And then with a little bit of leftover epoxy, I've just kind of given a coat of epoxy to that's the outboard pad down there. So that goes on the back of the transom. So there's 4 screw holes there for it. And that basically, it just acts like a sacrificial pad so that, you know, when you screw on the outboard very hard against the wood there, it will cause it to indent and wear. And so that's really for that purpose. So yeah, that's it for today. So yeah, see you tomorrow. Okay, good morning. So I've left that epoxy curing overnight, and I think the temperature dropped a little bit, so still a tiny little bit soft. So I need to leave that for a bit longer, so probably most of the morning. So I can't do any more work on those areas. So I have to jiggle things around slightly, but I'm still going to do the rudder stock and the dagger board, which are the main jobs for today. So what I've done for the rudder stock, which is this, is because this is going to be quite a difficult thing to coat in epoxy in one go. I mean, I could have clamped that somewhere and put 3 coats, which would have taken a whole day, on the rudder stock, and then perhaps clamp that, and on a different day put 3 coats on the tiller. But so that I can try and do it all today in one go, what I've done is I've created a kind of mock rudder, and I've screwed that to this workbench. So that's pretty solid. It's got 3 screws in there. That's 2 quarter-inch pieces of ply glued together, and I've also put a hole through it. So the idea is that this sits on top of there, like that. I'll put a bolt through about where the hole is. So that can't now inadvertently jump off, so I'm happy with that. So I can give that 3 coats of epoxy in one sitting just today. So yeah, I'm happy that's good to go. Now also, today, well, this is the centre seat, which has been epoxied, but the holes, I was actually supporting it on the holes to do the epoxying, so the holes need epoxying today, so that's another thing to do. That's like one of the little aside jobs. The main job is to do the dagger board. So how I planned to do that was, I've created this little rig, shall we call it, and the dagger board sits on this rig like this. Now I might need to put some tape in a few places, such as under here, so that I can actually paint that without it sticking together, and over the bolts as well to stop them A, sticking, and B, from coming out. So then start mixing epoxy and crack on. Right, let's get going. So that's the end of another video. Remember, if you'd like to receive notifications when new videos are posted, then subscribe by clicking on the link down below. And if you've enjoyed watching the video, just please leave a like. Cheers.